Thank you, Madam Mayor. I want to thank also everyone who spoke tonight and have sent us emails sharing their thoughts on this ordinance and really sharing their feelings and their stories about experiences that they have had. It was powerful testimony. When we voted on this back April 29th, there were sort of three main concerns that were raised that resulted in the call to delay the deadline until 2027. One was the concern around losing parking around on Main Street around Newtown Court. My understanding is that has been resolved and that there will be no net loss of parking spaces around Newtown Court. Is that accurate, Commissioner McKenna?
Commissioner McKenna?
Through you, Madam Mayor. I think we're talking about net loss of residential parking spaces.
Correct.
So yes, we're making sure that there will be no net loss of residential parking spaces.
Okay. The other concern raised was the PTDM ordinance, right? And that councilors wanting that to be in place prior to any construction happening on Cambridge Street and Broadway. We're taking care of that as we just discussed, and I appreciate Councillor Toner. I know he's been talking about this a lot, as he said, in terms of North Cambridge. We can get this through ordinance relatively quickly. So that concern is off the table. And so it leaves sort of this last piece, which is just the extension itself. And one of the concerns was raised was about giving the city more time to engage in a process and to do Cambridge Street and Broadway in 3 sections, I guess you could say, as opposed to doing it all at the same time. So, just a couple questions. So that's sort of the only outstanding thing in my eyes right now. We've taken care of the parking around Main Street. We've taken care of the PTDM, or we will. So we've heard a lot of folks tonight, over 100, talk about not extending the implementation deadline from the current deadline that is in the CSO, which would certainly be my preference, and I think that's why myself and Councillor Siddiqui, Sabrina Wheeler, and Azim brought in that amendment back in April, or wanted to keep it on the current timeline. But my understanding, and Commissioner McKenna, please correct me if I'm wrong, is that because we haven't moved forward really with any construction since then, we can't meet the current deadline that's in the CSO, so it has to be extended, and then the question becomes, extended to when? So I guess the direct question through you, Madam Mayor, is can you meet the original deadline in the CSO at this
Commissioner
point?
McKenna?
Through you, Madam Mayor. No, at this point, because of the delays over the past year, we cannot meet the original May 2026 deadline.
Okay, so through you, Madam
Vice
Mayor.
Mayor.
So the question, again, now comes back to how much of a delay. So when we discussed this in April, the city at that point said it could meet the original deadline, and we now know that that's no longer possible. And the extension to 2027, and I just want to clarify this because there was some confusion, that date and the language that came forward from the city for that date was because some councilors asked the city if they wanted to extend the deadline to 2027, what language would they need in order to do that? That was not that request to go to 2027 did not come from the city. The city was not asking to extend to 2027. Is that correct?
Through you, Madam Mayor, correct.
Okay. So, and during those conversations, we had asked if the city could, if there was going to be a delay, a compromise that was put out was to delay until 2026, and that would require the city to do the implementation in 2 phases rather than 3, but not in 1 phase, as a compromise. And the city at that point said, yes, you could do it in 2 phases by 2026 as opposed to 2027. Is that still the case, given how we sit today?
Commissioner McKenna?
Through you, Madam Mayor, yes. Sorry, that was a little loud. At this point, we could meet the November 2026 date that has been floated, as well as meeting the November 2027 date. Okay. Either of those would work.
Through you, Madam Mayor. And Commissioner McKenna, if the timeline is changed to November 1st, 2026, do you believe that you'll have enough time to address some of the issues that have been raised, such as what are we going to do about loading zones? What are we going to do about handicap spots? What are we going to do about some of the more problematic intersections? Are those all things that you will be able to look at and address if the deadline were to change to 2026?
Commissioner McKenna?
Through you, Madam Mayor, yes. Regardless of whether the deadline ends up being November, and I would ask for the end of November if we could get that either year, we'll do the same kind of thorough process along each corridor with a lot of public outreach, a lot of business outreach to work out all of the best curb uses. We'll give the same level of attention to the design details along the entire corridor, including intersections, regardless of which timeline we're on.
Okay. So, Madam Mayor, through you. So, given that we've addressed the concern that was raised around Main Street, we addressed the concern that was raised around the PDDM, given that we can no longer meet the initial timeline and there needs to be an extension, given that the city is not the ones requesting to go to 2027 and can accomplish what they want to accomplish by going to 2026, November 1st, 2026, and given that our own data shows that separated bike lanes reduce crashes, and we're already not only dealing with intersections on Cambridge and Broadway through this process, but we're actually looking at the most problematic intersections around the city through another process. So what we're talking about here are bike lanes so that things like we heard tonight in terms of people getting doored and falling into the street and getting injured, that those things will not happen as often. We can never say never, but we know by our own data that these bike lanes reduce these crashes significantly. I'd like to move the amendment that was submitted by myself, Councillor Siddiqui, Councillor Azim, and Councillor Sabrina Wheeler to amend the ordinance put forward by City Manager number 10 to change November 1st, 2027 to November 1st, 2026. I think this is given that it delays the implementation the way some people want and some people don't. It does not delay it as much as some people are asking for, and we still get to accomplish all the goals that the city is able to accomplish by 2026 as they are by 2027, and we don't have to wait as long risking people's safety. So I would like to move that forward and leave it for discussion. Thank you,
So there's a
Madam Mayor.
motion to suspend the rules in order to bring the... No suspension. You don't need a suspension? Okay, so we need to vote to bring it forward, and then we can have a discussion and vote it up or down.
Yes.
So I'm bringing this motion.
There's no motion needed to bring it forward. It's just an amendment.
It's just an amendment. She says it's just an amendment,
Just
so
an
we'll
amendment.
see.
Right.
So,
And if I would just say, Madam Mayor, before we get, if I put in November 1st, 2026, or we put in November 1st, 2026, because it was November 1st, 2027, if you feel that you need a little more time in November other than the 1st, then please make that clear and we can adjust it.
so the amendment is before us. Is there discussion? Councillor Toner.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you, Vice Mayor McGovern's last comment is exactly where we left off in April. And I know that the Vice Mayor, and I completely respect where he's coming from, but I know that we've had this disagreement about the word extension versus delay. What we asked for was an extension of the timelines, not to delay. In fact, we said during our conversations earlier in the year, if you can do it quicker, great. But just now, the vice mayor said, oh, and by the way, if you need a little more time, let's talk about it. So the date that's in there now, that's been proposed or suggested for as language, of November 1, 2027, gives the city all the time that it needs to do the job right and well and thoughtfully with the residents and businesses on Cambridge Street, Main Street, and Broadway. I realize and I know that some of this is going to be done well before that. I know that, and I'll ask for a little more of the timeline in a moment, that some of that will be done next spring, et cetera. It's really about the totality of the plan of being done in 2027. I also want to make it clear, because some people have accused me of putting words in the mouth of staff. I never did, and if you go back and watch the videotape of April, I made it very clear that it was us that came to the staff at the behest of residents and businesses from East Cambridge, Broadway, and Main Street, and said, we need more time to adjust to this significant change in the way things will be in our community, and we're asking the city for more time. And the staff did not come to us and ask us for more time. We went to the staff and said, if we needed more time to do this better and well with the community, what would the language be? And that's what the language was that came to us in April. I never said that the staff asked us to do this. We had conversations with the staff about how should we do this if we want to do this. So that's where we were. In April, we voted 5-4 to extend the deadline to 2027 to give the staff and the communities the opportunity to do it well, get everybody's input. There are going to be bike lanes. Nobody is saying we're not going to have the bike lanes there, but we're trying to mitigate things as much as possible. And I don't mean to be nitpicky, but yes, the PTD ordinance language sounds like we can get it done quickly, but I also heard that there's going to be processes that people have to go through to get them approved. Will it take till 2027? Probably not, but I'm talking about giving folks the flexibility. If the staff can get things done even quicker than that, great. But I don't know why we don't leave it as 2027 for going forward, to give the staff the time to do it well and do it right. And I totally respect and understand the testimony that we heard tonight. We all feel terrible about the tragic deaths that have happened in this past year. Two of them happened where we already have protected, separated bike lanes, and one happened not on our property, on DCR's property on Memorial Drive, and we couldn't control that, and it's terrible, and now DCR is doing something about that. Going forward, immediately we asked folks on the staff to take a look at the intersections and try to do as much as they can there to make them safer. So I think everybody on the council wants to do everything we can to make things safer, but there are also other things to be considered, and that's the small businesses in our community, the residents in the densest part of our city that are going to lose parking until there's some mitigation and things get changed. And I know people get upset with me when I keep bringing up parking, but I'm sorry, it is a way of life for some people in our city that need the parking. And I'm trying to represent them and do as much as I can to help them manage through this process. So I'll stop there, but I just wanted to ask the staff, currently, under the idea of doing things through 2027, what was your timeline in considering Main Street first, Broadway second, and then Cambridge Street? If you could just give us an outline of that.
Deputy City Manager Reardon.
Through you, Mayor Simmons, I'm going to hand you on to Commissioner McKenna, who I think has more details.
Through you, Madam Mayor. Assuming the 2027 deadline, so Main Street, we're very far along in the process, and that will be installed, depending on the language that's passed, either when the PTDM and zoning changes go into effect, or July 1st of this upcoming year, 2025, whichever comes first. So Main Street will be done quickly this year. For Cambridge Street, if we're looking at going out through 2027, we would be starting First, as soon as possible this spring, from Oak to Prospect Street. We want to get that in as early as possible to accommodate the outdoor dining in that section. Then from Prospect to Willow Street would be later in the summer into fall of 2025. There's a section next to the King Open School that will be done through construction, and that will be completed by 2026. We're doing that in conjunction with MassDOT. And then from Berkshire, the other side of the King Open block, to 2nd Street would be done over the summer of 2027. If we were looking to turn that into a 2026 timeline, we would combine the Berkshire into the summer of 2026. For Broadway, on the 2027 deadline, we would go from, in all of these, the limits may change slightly, so these are all tentative. Portland to Columbia in the fall of 2025, Columbia to Ellery in summer-fall 2026, and then Ellery to Quincy in summer-fall 2027. If we condense that down into the 2026 deadline, we would do Portland to Ellery in the fall of 25, and then Ellery to Quincy in the fall of 26. So that's kind of where we stand on preliminary timeline.
Thank
Councillor
you.
Toner?
Thank you through you, Madam Mayor. Thank you very much, Commissioner McKenna. I appreciate that. So again, I'm not going to repeat everything, but I'm simply trying to give you the flexibility that if you can get it done quicker, great. But if you need more time, it's simply saying that you don't have to have this done until 2027. Because we're putting out these deadlines, and I know that the staff takes the ordinance deadlines very seriously, and I don't want us to be back here again because you're saying, oh, gee, we need 6 months more, water pipes blew, something happened that would make it better for us. If we have this deadline of 2027, but you're actively working to get it done even quicker, great. That's where we were in April, and I hope that we can just stick with the November 1, 2027 deadline going forward. I yield, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Toner yields. Pleasure. I see Councillor Nolan, Councillor Sabrina Wheeler, and Councillor Zine in that order.
Thank you. I want to follow up on a couple of things. It would be helpful to me to hear through you, Mayor Simmons, from the staff, there have been some of the advantages of us having this timeline that was sent to, I think, the whole city and the council from Jason Alves, and what he mentioned was that, in his opinion, in the working group, led to better, more inclusive outcomes, that focusing on segments has allowed them to be more intensive on those segments, including one of the things we know, which is, I think, a separate question I will ask, is that the intersections need to be paid attention to, since that's where crashes happen and that's where the two deaths happened. And that also that the extra time allowed for funding for improvements in the design in the front of King Open and the Cambridge Street Upper School, that actually already had a separated bike lane. So it's a little concerning that money that was spent on a bike lane, a totally separated bike lane, is now going to be improved, which is good. But again, it's a sign that if you don't take the time to do the planning up front and perhaps have the time to do it, could you just comment a little bit about did that funding allow funding for improvements in the design? And also, my understanding is part of this is coming out of the Cambridge Street Working Group, and that was a council order from 2021, but it was only convened in mid of 2024. So that's the group that has been working on this. That was delayed a couple years, and so now it's in full process and it's been working on this. So could you just comment on that funding issue for the King Open bike lanes and the idea of focusing on segments?
And Councillor Nolan, who you would like to hear from? Commissioner McKenna?
Or who's ever been working on this or wants to respond to it. I believe the email was sent to the council as well as Commissioner McKenna, City Manager Huang, and DCMO Reardon.
Commissioner?
Through you, Madam Mayor. We are just convening the Cambridge Street Working Group now. I am very confident that working groups are a very effective way of working, but on all of our projects, including the initial outreach that we've done on Cambridge Street, we do a tremendous amount of outreach, both with the public and specifically with businesses. So a working group is another tool in the toolbox, and it does help. And it will be in place for the remainder of the work that we do on Cambridge Street, and that is true regardless of what the timeline is. I think that the question about the King Open Block is a lot of time went into the planning of that, and it was a very innovative design that was trying to meet a lot of different needs in that space. And I think it has not worked out the way we hoped that it would. And I think that the funding is an earmark from Representative Presley, and we're very excited to be able to use it in her district to really put in a very high quality facility. There's been a lot of advancements in how the public understands separated bike lanes since we were designing the King Open School, and it's going to be a much better facility when we're done. So we're very excited to have that opportunity to fully fund that and to work through MassDOT to do that work.
Council Nolan?
Thank you. And could all of the city staff, or DCM Reardon or DPW and Commissioner, refer to this question of what I heard at the last meeting, which is why I voted for it, is that, yes, we can get it done. We heard today we can get this done 2026 or 2027, and there's pros and cons to both, and there's advantages and disadvantages. So could we hear a little bit about what it is that could be, and again, I am with everyone who knows this. This is an extension of the final deadline. Anything that can be done earlier could be done earlier. But I'm just interested in struggling with this to hear. I did hear that there's pros and cons. It's up to us to decide. I understand that. However, there are advantages and reasons for doing it one or the other. So if the staff could address that, that would be helpful to me.
Council Nolan wants to hear from the staff on this. We'd like to start with you, Mr. Reardon, and we'll work our way down.
Thank you, Mayor Simmons. Councillor Nolan, I think we made mention of these trade-offs when we spoke in April. Obviously, given the significant feedback that councillors and staff have gotten from businesses and residents in the community, there's an impact on them as a result of the loss in parking. And we're all very conscious of that. And so, if we move that a little bit faster, there's a more significant immediate impact on them, and there's less time for them to be able to adjust. And so that's something that people have to bear in mind. At the same time, I think we all agree, if you have a protected bike lane on a given street, it affords cyclists more protection. And so for that period of time, when that protected bike lane is not on that street, they're not as protected as they would be otherwise. And so this is the really challenging situation that you have in front of you. There is more disruption in terms of loss of parking immediately, if indeed we do it faster. But at the same time, there's a greater risk to cyclists if you don't do it as fast. And so it's a real struggle, and I totally appreciate the fact that it's a very difficult decision for city councillors to make. But I don't know if I can put it any better than that for you.
City Manager.
Through you, Mayor Simmons, I would echo a lot of the way that Deputy City Manager Reardon has framed this. That was the conversation we were having in April, to say, on the one hand, we are looking at establishing safer bike infrastructure. The faster we put that in place, the more protection we're providing to cyclists. At the same time, there have been, and we've seen, a lot of disruption, especially for businesses, restaurants, the loss of parking on street, and the speed with which we are moving forward with bike lanes also has an impact on those establishments. What I've appreciated in this conversation is I do feel like both sides are hearing each other, and there is a value to say, on both sides, we want there to be safety for our cyclists. We want our restaurants to be able to succeed. We're willing to figure out how we can find additional parking. And I think a lot of the work has been trying to find these more creative ways to accommodate and to find some consensus. But as Deputy City Manager Reardon is noting, at some point there is still a trade-off to be made. How fast do we want to go? Where do we want to set the deadline? And I think that is where we do look to the council for how do we make some of those really difficult trade-offs when we have different parts of our community who may value things slightly differently or draw the line in different places. I think these are both feasible deadlines, whether we're talking about November 2026 or November 2027, from an engineering perspective, from a community engagement perspective. I think the challenge is often just how we try to communicate with all of our different stakeholders to be able to say, we have really listened, this is how we came to this decision. And then I think we're really happy to move forward with that. But have appreciated the conversation, even though it's been really difficult.
Ms. McKenna?
Through you, Madam Mayor, I think that Deputy City Manager and City Manager have really laid it out well. I think that there are challenges, and many people appreciate a slower rollout, and at the same time there is the trade-off around the faster that we can make our corridors safer, the better. So I think it's a very difficult decision, and it's a difficult set of trade-offs,
Councillor Bear?
certainly.
Deputy City Manager?
Nothing to
Councillor
add.
Toner, back to you.
I was actually Council Nolan.
Thank you. Councillor Nolan, back to you.
Thank you. That is helpful. I recognize that. And again, it's all about what the end point is, not if it can get done sooner. The other question I had, given the trauma of the last few months, we have had 2 deaths on our streets that were referenced often in public comment. We all felt them very deeply. Both of them were on streets with already protected bike lanes. They happened in intersections with trucks. We then rallied and said and put to the staff, we need to really look at our intersections. They are dangerous. We know that. We've been doing everything we can for trucks, but we do control some of the infrastructure at our intersections. There's lots of ways that other cities have addressed it. That is a new level of work that we have put on and asked the city to take on. So my question is, how does that interface with, while we have phenomenal staff and we're moving forward and we can get this done, we have also said we also want all these dangerous intersections to be reviewed. Some of it might be quick build, but we might want, some of the quick build doesn't protect you as much as hard build. So we really have said, and the staff has said, they are looking at prioritizing the most dangerous intersections. Some of them will involve construction. So I'm curious as how that effort intersects with this, and how we can be assured that as we move forward, because that's safety also, that the more that we can do in those intersections, the more likelihood that there's safety. And so that's also part of the trade-off, because we also know we can't do everything at once.
Are you yielding the floor?
Well, I think the question is how are those efforts moving forward? How is it that, because for me, I would think, given the burden on staff, we just threw a whole nother very related but incredibly important piece of work related to safety on the same staff that is moving forward with a very extensive work on the bike lanes, which I supported from the beginning, and I supported the idea of having an extension because I wanted it to be done better, to make sure we really had the time to do it. If it could be finished sooner, fine, but things happen. We know that there are often delays that happen, and we want to make sure that we're doing things as fast as possible, and yet recognizing this intersection work is a whole new piece of work. So I want to understand how that fits in with this.
Councilor Nolan wants to know how this fits together, so who would like to take that?
I'll take. Through you, Madam Mayor. We are one group of people with finite resources, so I can't say that there is no kind of interaction between the amount of effort in those two kind of separate but very connected work efforts. But what I would say is that I think that there is a lot of overlap on the two. This is hard to say when we're, just after 2 fatalities at locations where we had separated bike lanes, but the work that we do for the bike lane corridor does improve safety at intersections. Not as much as we would like, and I think that as we do these designs, there will be overlap with the high priority intersections as well, and we can kind of really utilize that analysis that's going on in one project to inform the other. So there's a lot of collaboration between the two work efforts that will happen there. And I think that as we identify opportunities as part of the corridor work, we can do a quick build version and then come back if it's called for to do more capital work later. The other thing I would say is that we're going to be doing a lot of analysis around the intersections, but we know that with the quick build separated bike lanes, we have a really effective tool for the rest of the corridor that we know will make a huge safety improvement. We've heard so many stories of dooring tonight, and we know that is something that is more or less eliminated when we put in the separated bike lanes. So, I think that there's a lot of overlap in the two works, and that we can do both work streams. But it's not to say that there's no impact.
Councilor Nolan yielding. Councilor Sabrina Wheeler, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Through to the city staff. When we talked about this back in April, we had talked about crash data and injury data on these 3 sections of the streets. We're now almost 6 months from there. So I wanted to ask in that time period, since April, how many crashes and injuries we've seen on the streets here that we're talking about.
Deputy City Manager Farouk, do you want to respond to that? Want to flip a coin?
I can take that. Through you, Madam Mayor. I don't have the numbers since April. I do have the 2023 through current for the corridors. And this is kind of, when we do further analysis, when we go in and into the corridors, we look deeply into the actual specifics of each location. But this is the very high level data, where on Cambridge Street, we're looking in 23 and 24 to date, 110 crashes. Of those 40 injury crashes, 20 of those involved bicycles and 8 involved pedestrians. On Main Street from Sydney to Portland, same time period, we had 13 crashes, 3 of which were injury crashes, 2 of which involved bikes. And then on Broadway, 93 crashes, 23 of which were injury crashes, 10 involved cyclists, and 7 involved pedestrians. So that's, close to 2 years for those corridors. And important just to note that the Main Street corridor is much shorter than the Cambridge and Broadway corridors.
Thank you.
Sabrina Wheeler.
And do you happen to have the just 23 broken out? Just trying to get, since we're talking about 2-year delay versus 3-year delay here, just what a full year looks like.
Ms. McKenna.
Through you, Madam Mayor. Our apologies. I just have the 23 and 24
Gotcha.
to date.
No worries. Thank you. Thank you. That's helpful. And just gives a sense of the number of crashes we're talking about here, and severity of crashes can really vary, as we've heard from folks tonight. We do have the PTDM changes before us tonight. As others have noted, they're going to be in place, I think, by early 2025 at the latest, well before what we're talking about here. As Vice Mayor McGovern said, 2026 deadline, November, would be a compromise. It's already a delay from the original ordinance language, and we still have all the tools before us if something were to come up, if there were to be a natural disaster, if there were to be a material shortage. As the council, we could delay more if for whatever reason we needed to. We have everything we need to do this by November 2026. I don't see the need to wait an additional year after that, and have more additional crashes and injuries that we've seen just in a year time frame on these 3 stretches. We can get this done by 2026. If for whatever reason we needed to delay further than that, we have the complete power to. So that would be my preference tonight. I yield back.
Councilor Sabrina Wheeler yields the floor. Councilor Zine, floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to go through 3 points that I felt like I would love some clarity on based on the comments heard tonight. The first is on whether we had a delay or an extension in the first place. If none of this had been introduced and we were still on the original Cycling Safety Ordinance, right, when would Main Street, Cambridge Street, Broadway have been done?
Miss Anna.
Through you, Madam Mayor. So Main Street would have been completed. It's hard to think back. Okay. So Main Street would have been completed in probably early spring, I believe, of 2024. Cambridge Street the first half of Cambridge Street would have been installed probably around now. We'd be finishing up. And then we'd be gearing up to do all of Broadway next year. We had intended to do the 1-year extension that was available to us for kind of other, because we do have a little bit of more additional mileage that falls outside of the Main Street, Cambridge Street, and Broadway corridor. So we had intended to request that 1-year extension. So those would have been finishing up after this fall. So by next fall.
Councillor Zine.
Thank you. So I first just wanted to start with, Main Street and Cambridge Street are obviously not done and not even started in the sense of actual construction yet. And so in my mind, that's a delay. The second point was that there was somewhat it was said earlier that this is, an extension, so you have until 2027, but, if you want to do it earlier, you will do it earlier, or you could if you feel like, all the items are in place. Is there any chance that, Cambridge Street, which you gave in a 3-phase plan, if we vote tonight on 2027, that it might actually be done in 2026?
Ms. McKenna.
Through you, Madam Mayor. I think that's a really difficult question for us because, the entirety of the success that we've had, or our ability to roll out the separated bike lane network as quickly as we have done so far, and regardless of what our eventual end date ends up being, we've been able to do that because of the will of the council and the political will that we've had behind us. So when I think about having, a later deadline, when we go out to a community, I think that some members of every community want us to push this as far out as possible. So if we have a final deadline of 2027, it becomes very difficult for us to accelerate that and finish everything earlier. I think that we have it, we're looking for direction from the council on what that timeline should be. So it's difficult to say that final deadline is in 2027, but go ahead and finish everything by 2026. That becomes much more difficult for us when we're out in the community working.
Councillor Zine.
Thank you. So I think in general, we should just come up with the expectation of whatever deadline that we're coming up with is what actually will happen. And then the third question was intersections were brought up. And so, for example, if we vote for 2027 deadline, the rest of Cambridge Street won't be done until 2027. Will any of those intersections be improved before then, or will it be done mostly with that third leg of Cambridge Street?
Ms. McKenna.
Through you, Madam Mayor, that's a difficult thing for me to answer right now just because we're still in the analysis phase on the intersections, and we really won't know what the level of effort on improving intersections are until we, first of all, know what the universe we're talking about and then what the right interventions are. So I'm not really able to say that we would or would not go to any particular location along Cambridge Street kind of in advance of when we go with the separated bike lanes.
Councillor Zine.
And this is then my last question, but the inverse is true. If we did do the rest of Cambridge Street, all those intersections would be improved before, if we did them in 2026, they would be improved, before 2027.
Yes, kind of in the scale of what we do in a typical quick build or quick build plus when we're able to do some construction. Yes, we will. Every intersection will have a design treatment as we go through. Whether it is as extensive as what we would do when we're looking at specific high crash locations in our other program, I can't say yet.
Thank you. So I would just say for those who are concerned about intersections that with going for 2027, we don't actually know if the intersections all will be addressed by then, but if we do vote for an earlier timeline, they will be addressed earlier. And I would just finally leave off with, I think that this is a compromise before us. I don't think any of the 4 councillors are particularly excited about it, but it's saying that, hey, at the beginning of this year, there was clearly a lot of concern about bike lanes, right? So we decided, to slow things down. But since after that, we got more information. 3 cyclists have been killed. There's been a lot of accidents. Maybe we should, still have an extension, but slightly shorter than before. And I think that sounds like a reasonable place to land. And so, I hope that we can get there.
Further discussion? Councillor Zuzi, and then the Vice Mayor.
Thank you.
Councilors Toner.
I have wanted the lanes to be done as quickly as it could be done well. So if you can ensure us that the lanes will be done well and will feel safe for cyclists, for pedestrians, for drivers, then I think that's great. I am now cycling all over the city, and I feel really lucky that I'm able-bodied enough to do that. I'm very aware not everybody is. And I'm glad we'll have the parking for people that need to drive. I mean, that's absolutely essential that we're thinking of others. Not everyone can cycle. And not everyone wants to cycle on rainy, snowy days. I just wanted to ask more about, so are the lanes designed in-house? And then what I keep hearing again and again is consistency in the development, the rollout of the lanes is very, very important. So are you striving for consistent rollout? And just, again, I'm new. I assume, do you have pretty thorough plans for all of these streets right now? So is it a matter of engaging the community and refining the plans? I mean, you've been working on this for years, so you must have plans, right?
Through you, Madam Mayor.
Ms. McKenna?
For each corridor is its own process, and we engage. It's basically a three-step process where we go out and we engage with the community around kind of the current conditions and how people are using the road, places where they, call out specific dangers or specific improvements they'd like to see. We take all that information. We go back and we come up with a preliminary set of plans. So really from the beginning of the design of the corridor, we have input from the community. So we take that initial input, we go back, we come up with draft plans. We go to a phase 2 public outreach where we bring those initial plans, get comments, then we further refine them and come back with stage 3 where we have kind of almost final designs. We can still tweak things like curb regulations and things like that. And then after phase 3, we move on to implementation. So we don't have plans for Broadway somewhere that we're just going to whip out and start sharing with the community. We'll start first by taking in information and then developing the draft plans and going from there. And that's true on all of the corridors. We do work on all of our projects with design consultants. So that is an essential part of the process. But there's a lot of city staff input, but the designs themselves are done by the consultants.
And Susie?
And the process for Cambridge and Main Street are already pretty advanced. You've really made a lot of progress there already.
Through you, Madam Mayor, yes. Main Street is very close to complete. I think we still have our phase 3 community outreach portion to go. We did, on Cambridge Street, we have kind of that initial draft set of plans because we did do the phase 1 of outreach for the entire length of Cambridge Street. So as we move on to the next portion, we'll take from those plans and just focus on whatever the limits are for the particular project.
Thank you. I can tell you that I rode on Cambridge Street on a weekend just to see how scary it was, and it was very scary. And I thought about going back during the week, and I was too nervous to ride on it during the week. So anyway, I thank you for your attention to the lanes. I think they make all the difference for getting around in the city. Thank you.
Council Susie yields the floor. Council Wilson, did you want to speak to this at all? Council Siddiqui, did you want to speak again? Speak to this?
Thank you.
Siddiqui,
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Simmons. I think my fellow co-sponsors, I think, did a great job, particularly Vice Mayor McGovern. I felt like it was like a examination. That's a joke for, the solicitor. But
I don't think she got it. But
I know. It's okay. Legal. Anyway, I thought you did a good job. So I don't have much to say beyond the fact that I think the deputy city manager, stated we're weighing, lots of disruption and the greater risk if we don't do it as fast. And I think that those two, for me, it's always going to be the latter, which is, I think, the greater risk to cyclists. And I hear you, Kathy, Councillor Zusi, on Cambridge Street. It's, you know, it's not just about these. It's people have mentioned like the three individuals who've passed in our infrastructure. It's the close calls. It's the almost. It's that constant likelihood. And so I think that for me, that's really important and resonates with me. And so I think that's where we've offered this amendment on the date, and I'm also open to the extending it to what the commissioner needs as far as end of November. But I wanted to just get that on the record for how we've displayed the decision and all the facts before us. I think that's how I come to that decision. Thank you.
Councilor Dickey yields the floor. Before we go back around again, I'll just say a few things. So as this matter comes before us today, I really want to reiterate my strong support for the continued expansion of safe, separated bike infrastructure in our city. I'm well aware, and we've all raised our concerns around the recent tragic bike fatality we had on Memorial Drive, and that's a stark, painful reminder of how we want to keep everyone on our roads, particularly our cyclists, safe. So the bike lanes, I think, for the entire council aren't just a matter of convenience. They're a critical component of a safer, more accessible Cambridge. So I want to extend my gratitude to those that were involved, Solicitor Bear, our city manager, all those that had a part. You've shown great dedication to moving this forward and been reasonably responsible around the competing needs of our community. But for me, it's essential that we balance urgency with thoughtfulness, and I believe this timeline before us, the one, not the amendment, but the 20, it's off my screen, the extended, a lot of people have kept saying delay. I don't see it as a delay. I think it's an extension to give, I'm sorry, Ms. Did you want to say something, Commissioner? I think the extension, which has been kind of painted as a delay, is just that, an extension to allow the people to do the good work in a way that's responsible and safe for all. So where I certainly say that the bicycle lanes should move forward quickly because our residents depend on it, I certainly want us not to sacrifice common sense, public input, or careful planning for the sake of speed. If we do it quickly and not do it well, then no one benefits from that. And so a couple of questions I have for you, Ms. Commissioner. You had said on phase 3, you're going to do some outreach. Tell me about the outreach that you did prior to that on Main Street. Let's talk about Main Street.
Sure. So we started with phase 1 with an online public Zoom meeting and pairing that with, I believe in each phase with Main Street, we did 2 in-person open houses. One kind of on Main Street itself at the corner of Bishop Allen Drive to kind of catch people maybe using the corridor or walking by on their commutes. And then one at Newtown Court to hopefully meet more of the local residents. So we did that for the phase 1 of the outreach when we were doing the initial feedback on kind of current conditions. And then we went back and we did that in phase 2 with our draft plans. We also, we did the same kind of 1 online and 2 in person. We also had an extensive online survey that we kept open for quite a while, collecting additional additional input, because we really like to give people as many different ways to get to us as we can.
So my question is, how many people were participated, and do you know exactly where they may have come from?
I don't have those numbers in front of me.
It'd be good to know that. I'm sure you and CDD are aware that there are 4 houses of worship and about 4 restaurants. Have we adequately reached out to them?
We have definitely been trying to reach out to all of the business. We have reached out to all of the businesses and the churches along the corridor. If there are additional churches outside of the corridor that we should be reaching out to, I'm happy to have a separate conversation about that. But
Well, there are a number of churches that you should reach out that are outside the corridor because they're very close to the corridor, number one. Having talked to a number of the churches, somehow they weren't quite aware that, I should say houses of worship, not call them churches, we're not quite aware, particularly about the loss of parking. A number of our houses of worship, which I'm very grateful for in a lot of ways, provide programming during the week, food pantries, outreach to the homeless, things of that nature. And so my concern is that they'll wake up one morning and half their parking spaces will be gone. And for the, let's focus on the interfaith community for a while. As Cambridge has become more and more gentrified, people have moved out the city, and their ability to come to these houses of worship are their lifeline to one Cambridge, but also to people, to the ability just to go to a place where they get moral and religious sustenance. And I don't want that taken away from them. I'm not, so what bothers me is I feel like we're sort of, there's one group that desperately needs support and service. I don't want it to feel like it's coming at the expense of another group that has been here longer than a lot of us. One in particular, House of Worship, has been here over 100 years. And so to just kind of turn a blind eye to them or diminish their concerns, I know, having spoken to a number of the people that are there, it is quite the disservice. So let's just focus on the houses of worship for a moment. There's their Sunday services, there's their social programs, there's funerals. And I don't know what provisions the city is making, and I think we should, because we want to keep our cyclists safe. And I want to make sure that they are, but I also want to make sure the people that go to our houses of worship, in particular, have the ability to have people that are coming to their house of worship for whatever reason they're coming, be it a homegoing service for a long-time member, again, a social service program, feeding the hungry, which a number of them do. Some of them have daycare programs, and we make it difficult when we remove the ability for them to park reasonably close. I think of one of the members that's 103. I'll wait for the city manager to talk to you. May I speak? No? Thank you.
Please go ahead.
So this parishioner that's 103 that comes to one of our houses of worship really needs to be able to drive up to the door and being escorted in. So that's my concern, that to benefit one group, we diminished another group. So for me, the extension is not a delay. It's saying for you that's going to do that good work, to have already built in or baked in, as we often say, additional time if you need it. So I don't want to be represented as saying I want to shorten the time for you to do this good work. I want you to understand that by keeping the date to 2027 just gives you more time. And I think it's the way you sell it to people. You know, if you say, well, we have to 2027, people are going to say, well, I don't want you to do it until 2027. May not be quite accurate. I think people don't want to feel rushed, and they don't want to feel as though I'm giving something, but the city's giving to one group and taking away from us. So it's a real delicate balance to say we're giving this benefit because we want people to be safe, but we're not going to do it on this bridge called your back. So I would really like to see your outreach timeline. I can bring that by way of a motion. I want to know who you spoke to. How often did you speak to them? I know surveys are wonderful, but everybody doesn't use surveys. And so we have to look beyond the normal way we do it. Are they monolingual or are they multilingual? Are you really digging down deep to make sure that we do this wonderful thing for one group of people while not disenfranchising another group. So I will yield the floor on that. But that's my concern. So one, I don't see this as a delay. It is clearly an extension. I've heard my colleague or colleagues say, if you can get it, this wonderful benefit done by a certain time, great. But to give you the bandwidth to not have to come back or apologize or do it sloppy, to have the 2027 so the work is done in a way that is really beneficial, but doesn't do it on the back of other people. I'm going to yield the floor. Further discussion, Vice Mayor?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, through you. Just two quick comments and then a question again for Commissioner McKenna. Just on the concern about, going too fast or that going too quick. We are in October, the end of October of 2024. We're talking about November of 2026. That is 2 years. We're not talking about this happening in 3 months or 2 months or 4 months. It's 2 years to do a process. And having, been to this rodeo before, I wonder that when we get to, if we extend this to 2020, I save the tape. If we extend this to 2026, when we get there are going to be people saying, we need more time, not enough process. If we did this to 2027, there would be people saying, not enough time, we need more process. I mean, if this is why the Cycle Safety Ordinance was so important, was because the city had a cycling safety network plan for years, but was only very slowly implementing it because there was always pushback from people saying, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. And until we put deadlines in, nothing was happening. So deadlines are important. And to the point of, and I do believe, I believe what Councillor Toner said, and Madam Mayor, what you said, that you would like this, you want to give the longer time period to give some more flexibility should it be necessary. But we heard the answer from the city that if the deadline is 2027, here are the phases they're going to do it, and it's going to take to 2027. If the deadline is 2026, they'll get it done by 2026. So that's why the deadlines are important. I would rather you come back in 2026 and say, look, friggin' supply chains, or we had, a water main break or whatever, we need 6 more months. That's more likely, and that's, I think, easier for people to understand than to say, oh, we're not going to do this to 2027, and then they wake up in 2026 and it's done. Then they're going to feel more gypped, right? So, we've heard that it can be done by 2026. We heard that the process can be thorough by 2026. We've heard clearly from the city and from others that the safety impact of doing this. So, and a compromise, as Councillor Azim said. I wish we stayed on the original timeline. I'm not happy about 2026, but that's where we are. We can't keep on the regular deadline. And so, sometimes compromise means everyone gets a little something and gives up a little something. There's going to be a lot of cyclists who are not going to be happy if 2026 passes, right? And there's going to be some people who are not going to be happy because they wanted 2027. And that's what compromise is. Everybody gets a little something, but maybe not everything. And we talk so much in here about how do we compromise on these important issues. That's what this is. So I guess my question, Madam Mayor, through you to Ms. McKenna, because I did put in November 1st. Are you saying November 30th to give you I thought the construction period ended in November. So if you need November 30th, because there might be construction going, the construction period extends into that, then I'm happy to change it to November 30th. I thought the first was the.
Through you, Madam Mayor. We can often do, especially in years where we have warmer weather in November and better weather in November, we can extend our pavement marking work into November. So November 15th or November 30th would be great. If it's November 1st, we may have a little few things here or there that we're still a little extra green paint, something like that. But
So, Madam Mayor, can we change that to say November 30th and we'll give you that whole month
It's your amendment, sir.
instead of November 1st?
So you'd like to further your amendment to November 30th?
30
What are
days
you
for
saying?
September, April, June, yes, 30th.
Ms. Stefan, can you capture that? Further discussion? Council Wilson?
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
And then Council Nolan.
I've just been holding myself from being able to speak, just adding thoughts here. I want to also just appreciate everyone who spoke in public comment. I think what we are really challenged with here is a situation where we're talking about the safety of all on our streets and the accessibility of how we utilize our streets and what's being prioritized here to make it a political statement. I really just despise the fact that we have to be sitting in this seat to be making this political conversation. I wish that it was on the city to say, this is what we can do, this is how we can do it, and actually get it done. I think that is really the role in which you all have and serve also as authority of our city and leaders in our city as well. But to make it be put back on us as elected officials to make this a political back and forth is really heartbreaking. And I think at the end of the day, it is the whole community that honestly fails at the delivery of what actually comes out of this conversation as a whole. You know, I think about the conversation as Madam Mayor just talked about for Main Street. I worship at Union Baptist Church, and I was on many of those calls and attended many of those in-person sessions and gave a lot of feedback as to how we can improve the conversations and the dialogue with our community. As a direct abutter to the Garden Street installation, and talked about how the lack of connection and community engagement that I was able to receive as a direct abutter. There's a lot of work as a city that we need to be doing to making sure that our community outreach is stellar, because there are a lot of people who oftentimes get left out and then wake up on a Monday morning or whatever day when installation starts to be like, what is going on here? So there's a lot of work that we need to be doing here to make sure that our community outreach is top of the top. And it's not going to be 100%, but we really need to learn and build upon what we're learning, the mistakes that have been made, and how we actually do better, whether that's language, whether that's holding more sessions, and really making sure that we're a part of different community events and utilizing the council as a resource to help get information out. As I shared with you, Commissioner, through you, Madam Mayor, we had a conversation around even the Cambridge Street Task Force, right? And really trying to gather more information, gather more people to sit on that, to join that task force. I just feel like this thing that we're doing here around 2026, 2027, what we ultimately want to see is that we are making safe streets that are actually done efficiently, effectively, and that we can save lives, but also make sure that our streets are safe and make sense for all who use them. It's not just one population that uses our streets. There are several stakeholders who uses our streets. Businesses who rely on parking, loading zones, handicap spaces, so much more, that when we do these things in a very hastily manner, that we actually don't take into consideration, or that gets maybe sidetracked because we want to speed our way through something. That's not appropriate. And I think that's where we need to be able to be thoughtful and be very intentional in how we actually are engaging our community and our public about what the next steps are. This isn't that we want another life to be lost on our streets, okay? This is about we want to move as a community, as a city, together to getting things done. And so having the extended possibility, the flexibility of being able to do things in a more methodical and thoughtful way is what can be really helpful here. It doesn't mean that people who vote for or against are less this or less that, or care less about bikers or not. We all, I really hope that our community is hearing that every member of this body cares about the life and the safety of all members of our community, whether visitors or residents. But I'm not feeling this political game that we have to be in this space of making a vote for you all to ultimately do the job. So I just needed to name that, and I needed to be on record naming that, because this position sucks. Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to, through you, thank Councillor Wilson for articulating so much of what we're feeling. I am just struck and reeling a little bit because we've heard some things like delay, but in fact the memo from the city staff said Main Street isn't delayed at all. It would have been done next year under either scenario. So I've just had some confusing discussions here. I'm looking at the memo, and it was that part of Main Street would be done in the spring of fall 2024 and the rest in spring of 2025, which is the scenario under the 2027 deadline too. And I think part of what we're struggling with is in the original language, by using May as a term, it is never May. It is really November. And so, well, in fact, in the original timeline, it says 2027. So you think, well, it would only be extended 6 months. But in fact, May of 2027 really effectively means November of 2026, which just leads a little bit to confusion, or also some people feeling like, well, what were you trying to pull over on me? You know, you're saying 2027, but it really is 2026. I think it's not good for us to have that be in the community of some people feeling that we are not being direct and honest about the actual timelines. I don't think it was deliberate, but it ends up being something that makes people jaded about the city communicating with them. Because for sure, I would bet if you surveyed the city, at least half would say, yes, definitely take some extra time, we need adjustment. And yet we heard 99% of people tonight, you would think just listening tonight that the entire city would want no change at all. And yet at least half the city, if not more, would say, oh, we think taking extra time is a good thing. But it's a question of who even knows about this meeting and who follows it. I think the hundreds of people who reached out in the spring about this, asking for some more time, assumed it was done in April and doesn't even know that we're now voting to possibly change it. So I want to honor what all of us have said, is we do need more community process, and we also have to name it and own it and say that is not a good situation to be in, because it does mean, as Councillor Wilson was saying, the whole community is not necessarily involved and aware of all this. And we saw, it is true, when we did North Mass Ave, when we did Garden, when we did Brattle, people woke up and had no idea that it was even happening, which doesn't mean it's not the right thing to do eventually. I am 100% in favor of multimodal transit. It's just makes it more challenging to figure out how to approach it. And I have to say also, I think Broadway is a road that's going to be more challenging to do and more difficult than others. And yet it's in the ordinance, so now we're going to do it. And yet, should that be in it, or should there be other streets that should be considered? I mean, I just worry a little bit we're hamstring in the city, and I really wish we'd have an open, honest conversation about, is that the right street? Because I've heard different things from folks across the city about that. So that's my hesitation and real concern about us having these conversations. And I realize we only have these conversations when we're forced into saying, let's have actual language, but I just want to raise some of those concerns and those very specifics about why it is that, I'm really struggling to figure out what is the actual best thing for the entire city. So I don't think that was a question in there, Mayor Simmons, but I wanted to respond. Thank you.
Councilor Nolan yields the floor. Pleasure of the City Council. What we have before us are two amendments. The first one we have to take up is November 30th. The second one is 2026. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. On the first, by no later than November 30th, roll call.
On the amendment to the amendment, Councilor Azim?
Yes.
Yes. Vice Mayor McGovern?
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Nolan? Yes. Yes. Councilor Siddiqui?
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Sabrina Wheeler?
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Toner?
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Wilson?
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Zusi?
Yes.
Yes. Mayor Simmons?
Yes.
Yes. Madam Mayor, 9 members have voted yes.
On the Second Amendment, which is by no later than November 30th, 2026. Any discussion? Roll call.
On the amendment as amended, Councilor Azim?
Yes.
Yes. Vice Mayor McGovern?
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Nolan? Present. Councilor Siddiqui?
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Sabrina Wheeler?
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Toner?
No.
No. Councilor Wilson?
No.
No. Councilor Zusi?
Yes.
Yes. Mayor Simmons?
No.
No. Madam Mayor, 5 members have voted yes, 3 members have voted no, and 1 member is recorded as present.
Madam Mayor, can I please change my vote?
Councilor Wilson requests to have her vote changed. What would you like to change your vote to?
Yes.
Councilor Wilson is changing her vote to yes.
Mayor Simmons, I would like to do the same.
Councilor Nolan is changing her vote to yes. Other changes, additions, or deletions? Hearing none, it looks like the vote is now becomes 7 yes, 2 noes. You need a roll call for that?
Yeah.
Roll call.
So
On
on
the
changing
changing of the
Councilor
votes.
Wilson's vote to yes and Councilor Nolan's vote to yes. Councilor Azim?
Yes.
Yes. Vice Mayor McGovern?
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Nolan? Yes. Councilor Siddiqui?
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Sabrina Wheeler?
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Toner?
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Wilson?
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Zusi?
Yes.
Yes. Mayor Simmons?
Yep.
No. Did you
said
put
yep.
yes? Yes. Madam Mayor, 9 members have voted yes.